So really quite bad news for some people for building lists for Warhammer 40k. It looks like it might be the beginning of the end for the Battlescribe app. Hello and welcome back to Warspets Tactics, where today I thought we'd talk about the rather unfortunate news that Battlescribe appears to be no longer available on the iPhone App Store. And with no updates for it for an excessively long time, it seems like it's only a matter of time before its compatibility starts breaking down across other platforms. I imagine that probably the majority of people who are watching this know well what Battlescribe is already. In a nutshell, it's basically the most popular list building app for Warhammer 40k, and a genuine asset to the 40k community as a whole, particularly with all the random bits of war gear and the complexity of other things that you can add in 9th edition. A list building tool can be really quite handy. It shows you your options, and it allows you to easily add and take away bits to swap out things for different units, while not having to rewrite the list from scratch. The vast majority of people who I know who are into the 40k gaming side of things use Battlescribe. I'm sure there's plenty of theory crafters watching right now who have a crazy ton of draft lists saved on the device. Battlescribe is a third-party application. It's not run by Games Workshop. As we'll get onto, Games Workshop do offer their own army builder, but it's got plenty of flaws. The way that Battlescribe works is that it's a third-party app. It supports plenty of wargaming systems, and the 40k data is provided by a dedicated team of fans, breaking down each codex as it comes out, making all the options work with Battlescribe's systems, and patching any errors or oversights that are fed in by the rest of the community. A really cool example of Warhammer community spirit, making the game a lot more playable for a whole lot of people. I'm sure Games Workshop aren't the biggest fan of a third-party company being the main list builder for their game, but Battlescribe is interestingly safe from legal wrath, as it basically just makes a platform that other people can use to build army things, and all the 40k content is just made by some fan creators sharing data files. To be honest, I'm sure that shutting down Battlescribe would be a bad thing for Games Workshop even if they could. 40k's got a whole load of learning curves with lots of things that you need to master, and having a good system for messing around with army lists really does lower one barrier to entry. It's maybe not without some of its flaws. Some of the basic exports just have a little bit too much detail on, so they're very hard to read, but it far outcompetes any of the alternatives at the moment. Plus, it's also used by the tabletop simulator community to generate models with stats with. Losing Battlescribe wouldn't be the most helpful for them. So that's Battlescribe, and basically today's news is that it's not really all plain sailing for the app. If you go to the iPhone App Store, then it's basically no longer there, though it does remain available for Android and for PC. It still functions on other platforms for now, though its future is far from certain. Currently, if you're an iPhone user, you can still use it if you've downloaded it, but you can't download it again if you had deleted it or if you've got a new iPhone. It's basically being classed as abandonware and deleted. For anyone who's an iPhone user and have got Battlescribe installed on their phone, that is now the way that you have to use it. If it gets deleted somehow, then it's basically gone for good and you'll not be able to get it back. The reason for this happening is kind of interesting. The owners of Battlescribe have stopped supporting it. Apparently, they used to be at least somewhat communicative and receptive to their outside audiences and communicate a little with the teams who made the data that their app supported. But one day they just decided to shut off communications, and no changes have been made to the app since then. Kind of weird, as it's really quite a popular app due to the 40k community. I guess someone's still getting a fair amount of income from it. It's kind of weird that they just make zero effort into maintaining it. If an app's just left to languish like this indefinitely, each time there's a software update either on Android or on iPhone, there'll be a small chance of something just not being compatible with the old and unmaintained app, and the software just ceasing to function altogether. Apparently, Apple has a policy of removing unsupported apps after 2 years, just basically declaring them dead unless the owner decides to update them again. It was still working well enough beforehand, and apparently if the owner had chosen to, then they could have avoided this by publishing a pretend update where they didn't really change anything, but they haven't chosen to do that. It's really quite bad news for the 40k community. It means that a fairly universal app that was very helpful for building armies is basically not quite as universal anymore. A lot of the community will be looking for an alternative as soon as one is available, and it must be pretty frustrating for the fans who are maintaining the 40k app database that all their hard work isn't quite as useful to the community as it was before, just because Battlescribe has been abandoned and is now dying a slow compatibility death. I guess that brings us on to possible alternatives. I guess first and foremost amongst them is Games Workshop's offering themselves their army builder for Warhammer 40k. This one is a subsection of the 40k app, something that now comes as part of their Warhammer Plus subscription. Being behind a much more expensive paywall than Battlescribe isn't exactly the best thing in the first place, but if the quality was up to scratch, then I think a lot of people would use it. Unfortunately, I think while it does do some things quite well, and it does feel kind of polished, at least on a surface level, it just seems to be dogged with all sorts of different errors and bugs. I frequently see people sharing screenshots of different ways that it's messed up, certain units with a points cost of 0, or struggling to find certain bits of war gear because you haven't ticked a certain checkbox. It is pretty weird seeing as this is an app coming from the company itself, as they're actually trying to sell this thing. You'd hope it'd at least equal the community effort, and ideally better it. It is a bit strange as well, seeing as the Age of Sigmar app has a lot more praise and high regard than the 40k one, and I genuinely can't help but think that if they just had enough time to rectify the community's issues with it one by one, it probably wouldn't be the hardest thing in the world to make it cross the threshold of being a lot more usable. I genuinely feel like it isn't really all that far away at the moment, but if you just have a certain proportion of errors whenever you use it, people just won't be able to trust it and not be able to rely on it as a source for building armies. If Games Workshop don't manage to improve it, then that would leave us with one of the various different community options, and I have seen a fair few different names banded around online. Games Workshop seems to be unable to shut down the public source of rules that is Warhapedia, and they're still a very easy resource for accessing points costs and things, and any of the rules in really quite an intuitive manner, though it's not exactly a list builder, more just somewhere that you can find the rules very easily. Otherwise, a few different options that have been floated are things like New Recruit. Apparently that's the army builder for the 9th Age version of Warhammer Fantasy. To my knowledge, I believe that that one has a decent amount of functionality for 40k. I can't say I've used it myself though. Otherwise, another name that's been mentioned a fair bit is Rosterizer, apparently an app in beta stage that sounds kind of promising. That one sounds like it's very much trying to directly do what Battlescribe did before, to my knowledge. And there was also some mention of an app called Phalanx, made by the 40k data file team community, who supply the Battlescribe data files themselves. At the moment, I guess Battlescribe will be limping on. The vast majority of people will still have access to it, but this does seem like a very tangible step towards the app dying completely. As always, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What list builder app do you think we'll be using in 5 years' time? Will it be Battlescribe? Will it be GW's app? Or will it be one of the new rising contenders? If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k news stuff coming. I do tend to post new videos just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description. If you've been finding all the updates helpful and you'd like to help keep them coming, the channel's Patreon page is the main way that I can continue to make videos like this quite so regularly. Channel patrons get a few advantages, being able to see certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.